Welcome. This is Chapter 6, mini lecture on the open economy. All right. So far, we've looked at closed economies. Closed meaning no international trade, no goods, no services, no capital flows in and out. It's as if the country was the only one on earth. Now we're going to relax that. There we go. An open economy where goods and capital can flow in and out changes a couple things. First, if it's a closed economy, you can only consume what you produce. And everything you produce, you will consume. So, let's see where this is. You cannot see the cursor on that. All right. There we go. Okay. In an open economy, you can consume more than you produce, at least temporarily, by importing. And you can invest in a closed economy. If you want to invest money, you have to save it first. In an open economy, you don't have to, because just as goods can go in and out of the economy, so can capital. Definitions. The current account is, very loosely speaking, movement of goods and services. Capital account, movement of financial assets. And the balance of payments, combination of the two. Our old friend, the fundamental equation of national income accounting. You can just rearrange this. Solve for NX, and you get net exports equals total output minus this term. This term, consumption plus investment plus government, it's everything you are, broadly speaking, consuming. You produce that much, you consume that much. What's left over? Savings. Savings that is not invested. It goes out. But that's capital going out. This term on the left, net exports, is goods and services. This concept gives some students a little trouble. Imagine there are only two countries, the United States and Germany. If you want to sell something in the United States and you want to sell it to someone in Germany, export. Well, we use the dollar. They use the euro, at least for now. So you don't want to get paid in euros. Euros are fine, but you can't pay your rent in Fargo in euros. You need dollars. So someone in Germany who wants to buy something from you, to export from the United States, import from the German perspective, the German has to get dollars. How do they get dollars? Well, basically two ways. Someone in the United States can loan dollars to Germany. Then they have dollars, but that's capital flowing out. They then use that money to buy those dollars to buy something made in the United States. That's goods flowing out. They're both going in the same direction. The other way is a German could sell, doesn't matter, something, a capital asset. If a German were to sell a product, like a clock, To someone in the United States, yes, we would send them dollars. But then an uh, that would be an import for us, so it would reduce net exports. Um, but if someone in Germany were to sell a financial asset, that would not be counted in net exports. But yet cash would flow out from the United States buying the financial asset to Germany. In either case, for someone in Germany to buy an American product, they have to get dollars. We have to, one way or another, send dollars out of the country, get them into the German person's hands so that they can buy our product. So if exports are flowing out, the exact same volume of dollars must be flowing out, which is why output minus consumption gives us domestic savings, excess savings, savings that are not being invested, leftover cash essentially. If this is a positive term, then cash outflow is that positive term, which must exactly equal goods that we're selling to other countries. That's why the two are equal. Let's see. Give me one moment. Here we go. Link between trade and capital flows. This term on the left, we've been dealing with quite a bit. Total output equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Over here, savings. Where do savings come from domestically? Well, there's the total amount that the economy produces. We consume some of that. Government consumes some of that. What's left over is saving. Okay. You take this term on the left, this equation on the left, and you just solve for nx. Nx equals this. Now, you can rearrange these terms. Leave Y and C where they are, and just switch the order of I and G. That doesn't change anything, does it? And put some parentheses in here. That doesn't change anything. But if you do that, look what you've done. This term, Y minus C minus G, that's the same as there, which means you can substitute in savings, and you get net exports equals savings minus investment. But savings minus investment is net capital outflow. We save $1,000. We invest $800 domestically. We have $200 left over. It goes out of the country, which is how you get this. Let's see, next item. Supply and demand for loanable funds in a small open economy. Okay, open. That just means that capital and goods and services can flow in and out freely. International trade happens. But this term, small, this is very important. This model is a model of a small open economy. In this context, small means no market power. This is a country where no matter what they do domestically, it will not change the world equilibrium for anything. It's like you going to the grocery store. Nothing you do is going to change the price of a can of corn on the world markets. Mostly this book was written by an American. I'm an American. Most of you are Americans. So it's natural that we discuss these issues in the context of the United States economy. Because we understand the United States economy. We know it. We know roughly the purchasing power of a dollar because we use it every day, etc. This presents a bit of a problem because the United States, although we are an open economy, we are most definitely not a small economy. Domestic policy changes, things that the United States does, will move international markets. We do have market power in that sense. So, and in other ways, we'll get to later in the course, the U.S. really operates by different economic rules than any other country in the world. Because our currency is the reserve currency for a lot of reasons, we're different. So using the U.S. as a model can cause some problems. So for the next part of this course, we're going to pretend that the U.S. is just like it is now, except it's tiny, so that nothing we do changes world markets. We don't have market power. That way we can discuss a small open economy and also do it using the terms of the U.S. economy that we're all familiar with. Okay. Let's see. In this model, output is a function of capital and labor, both of which are exogenous and thus fixed. Therefore, output is fixed. Consumption is some function of total output minus taxes. Investment is determined only by the interest rate, and government spending and taxes are exogenous. So, we have this. In this model, and I know it's unrealistic, but that's a good thing because it simplifies stuff so we can understand it better. Savings are exogenous to the model. They are simply a given. In particular, in this model, savings do not depend on the interest rate. Now, that's obviously not the way it works in the real world, but that's okay. Here we assume this is savings and investment. This is the interest rate. Savings are simply fixed. Interest rate goes up, we don't save more, we don't save less. That makes the supply curve, essentially, for loanable funds, savings, vertical. Let's see. Why isn't that opening? Give me a moment. There we go. A couple more assumptions. We talked about the economy being small. We're also assuming the open part of open small. Open means there are no restrictions on the movement of goods, services, capital. Perfect capital mobility in particular. You're allowed to take your money out of the country if you want. That is definitely not true about many countries. And we're assuming that there is no risk premium. An investment here, an investment in another country, they're all identical. Equal risk, equal terms, everything. Okay. That is the supply of, this is a supply and demand graph for loanable funds. This is the supply of loanable funds, savings. This is the demand for loanable funds, investment. Now, although we're assuming that the supply of loanable funds, savings, does not change with the interest rate, we're assuming that the demand does. The interest rate is essentially the price, how much you have to pay to borrow funds for investment. If the interest rate is very high, people won't want to invest a lot. It costs too much. Low interest rate, it's a demand graph. Very simple. And therefore, we have an equilibrium. This is the interest rate. This is therefore the quantity of investment, quantity of loanable funds demanded. Now, notice here, this isn't R, it's R star, R star. Since this is an open economy, we're assuming that the price, the equilibrium, is determined on the international markets, which means there is some world price for loanable funds, the world interest rate. So this is not determined domestically. Just as whether you buy a can of corn or not doesn't change the price. So whether domestically we want investment funds or not doesn't change the world price for them. Let's see. Now, if it's a closed economy, okay, see, this is open. If this is, come on, the closed economy, then we have supply, demand, equilibrium price. But because it's an open economy, domestically we have this supply of loanable funds from savings and this demand, which would imply an equilibrium price here. But that's not the price. Because we're an open economy, we essentially are importing the world price. So the price is here. But if the price is here, that means that we're supplying this much savings, but because the price is high, we're only demanding this much investment. So we're saving more than we're investing by this quantity. If we're not consuming it, government isn't consuming it, we're not investing it, what happens to this leftover cash? Savings have to be invested somewhere. They will go out of the country. The savings goes out of the country, dollars go out, which eventually will be used by people in other countries to purchase our products. Therefore, this quantity of excess savings causes the exact same quantity of exports. Well, let's see. Here's an example of how fiscal policy domestically can change exports. Let's assume we were in the previous case. Domestic savings, supply of loanable funds domestically, demand for loanable funds domestically, and the world star price of loanable funds, which means that this amount here, NX1, would be capital flowing out and thus exports flowing out because they have to be equal. But then if domestically the government decides to spend more, Well, the government will be consuming more stuff. There'll be less available for savings. Savings will go down. So the savings curve will shift from the supply of loanable funds curve will shift left to S2, which means net exports will go down from NX1 to NX2. That's one mechanism by which fiscal policy can change trade balances. Let's see. Okay. The nominal exchange rate. Between domestic currency, this bit is about what determines exchange rates. How many dollars you can get for a euro, how many British pounds it takes to buy so many yen. Exchange rates between currencies. What determines them? First, the concept nominal exchange rate. This is just that simple number. Like the nominal interest rate, it's the number written into contracts. It's the number you see advertised. If you go to the airport to exchange currency, don't do it there. They give you terrible rates. Go to your bank. They'll have a sign that says, we'll give you so many yen for each dollar. That's the nominal rate. But there is another rate. If I can get to it. The real exchange rate. The real exchange rate is the amount of one currency relative to another that you need to buy the same thing. And those two rates should be, if there was perfect arbitrage, they would always be identical. But they're not. They're similar. The two rates do vary from each other slightly. Real exchange rate, we will use the lowercase epsilon. A simple example. If it takes $2 United States dollars to buy a Big Mac, because Big Macs are the same everywhere, and it takes 400 Japanese yen to buy the same thing, a Big Mac in Japan, then the real exchange rate would be the ratio of the two, 200 yen to the dollar, which may not be exactly the exchange rate you get on the international foreign exchange markets, also called the Forex markets. Okay. Nominal versus real exchange rate. Give me a moment to find an example. Where did I put it? Okay. First, net exports. How do net exports relate to the exchange rate? Well, they are a function of the exchange rate. Because if someone who has euros, this German person again, wants to buy something from the United States, they have to pay in dollars. That means they have to trade their euros for dollars to get enough to buy the thing. Well, the ratio at which they can exchange them determines, in part, how expensive it is for them in real terms to buy that product. If they have to give up a huge number of euros to get very few dollars, they're probably not going to want to do it, which means they don't buy our product. If a very few euros buys a huge number of dollars, then they'd be more likely to do it, and our net exports would be higher. So we have this. The real exchange rate, if it's high, meaning the dollar is strong, essentially, a dollar is worth many of some other currency, then our exports will tend to be low because people in other countries will have to give up a very large quantity of their currency to get enough dollars to buy whatever it is we're selling. And they'll tend not to do that. If the dollar becomes weaker, and again, this is if the United States were a small economy. If the dollar was weaker, so it took more dollars to get one unit of foreign currency, or fewer units of foreign currency to get a dollar, then our exports would go up. Because if somebody in Germany needs 100 US dollars to buy a product from us, they can get that $100 by giving up fewer euros. It's a better deal for them. Okay. Here is the example I was looking for. Let's assume that there are only two countries and there are only two people. There is Akira, who lives in Japan, and Joe, who lives in the US. And starting out this model, the exchange rate is 100 yen to the dollar. I think that's somewhere in the neighborhood of accurate as of 2020. Okay. Guitars. Akira makes very nice guitars, handmade. They're sweet. Now Akira sells them for 100 yen. Actually, I see a detail here that didn't translate. The symbol for dollars, you know it, it's the big S with either one or two vertical lines. The symbol for Japanese yen is that, capital Y with two horizontal lines. It didn't show up there, and I don't know why, but just so you know. Okay, Akira makes guitars, Akira sells guitars, and the price is 10,000 yen, about $100. Akira doesn't want dollars. Akira wants yen, because when Akira's landlord says, "Where's the rent?" he's got to have yen. If he wants to go get something to eat, he's got to have yen. So the 10,000 yen that Akira wants for a guitar, at this exchange rate, $100. Joe in the United States wants one of Akira's guitars. So Joe buys a guitar and sends Akira 100 United States dollars, because that's what Joe has in the United States. Akira can't use United States dollars. So Akira goes into the international foreign exchange markets, the Forex markets, and trades his 100 United States dollars for Japanese yen. And at the current exchange rate, Akira gets 10,000 yen. So now Akira has 10,000 yen, Joe has a guitar, all is well in the world. Akira is essentially selling the dollars and buying yen. Okay, we're going to pretend the Forex market is just one person, one entity, which makes it simple. The foreign exchange market, this person, had some quantity of dollars and some quantity of yen. Now that person has $100 more, 100 more US dollars, because the foreign exchange market just bought 100 US dollars from Akira. And whatever quantity it had before, the foreign exchange market now has 10,000 yen less than it used to. Every time we buy something from Japan, this happens over and over and over. So now the foreign exchange market keeps buying dollars and selling yen. The foreign exchange market is building up dollars. It has a warehouse full of dollars now and very few yen left. So Joe wants another guitar and sends 100, buys another guitar, sends it to Akira. Akira has another 100 US dollars. Akira goes to the Forex market, say, hi, I'd like to trade this $100 for 10,000 yen. And the foreign exchange market says, no. I have a warehouse full of US dollars. I only have this little pile of yen left. I don't need more dollars. And Akira says, please, please. And Forex says, no. Can you think of how Akira could persuade the foreign exchange market to make the trade, to take even more dollars, another 100 of them, and cough up some yen? By changing the price. The foreign exchange market says, all right, I'll trade the dollars and the yen, but I'm not going to give you 10,000 yen for $100. I'll give you 5,000 yen. At that rate, I'll do it. So, for $100, I will give you 5,000 yen. Akira has a problem. Akira sells these guitars for 10,000 yen and is not willing to take less. So Akira has to go to Joe and say, look, I'm sorry, but if you want another guitar, you'll have to send me whatever number of dollars it takes for me to end up with 10,000 yen. Well, at this exchange rate, that would take $200. So although the price of the guitar has not changed in yen, still 10,000, the price has gone up in dollars, up to 200. Well, just from this one transaction, if you're in the United States and you want to buy foreign goods, like Akira's guitars, because the exchange rate has changed, the United States dollar is now worth fewer yen. It's weaker, a weaker currency. From our perspective, it looks like foreign products have become more expensive. That guitar, I bought this great Japanese guitar last year, it was $100. Now it's 200. Oof. But if that's the case, we're going to buy fewer foreign products because they cost too much. So our imports will go down, which is the same as saying U.S. net exports will go up. We will import less. But look at the same thing from the other perspective. We were talking about a buyer in the U.S. and a seller in Japan. But we also sell things to Japan. Trade goes the other way. Someone in Japan, let's say you're selling something in the United States and you're selling it for $100, a U.S. guitar. Somebody in Japan wants to buy it. They take 10,000 yen, exchange it for $100, send the $100 to the U.S., we send them the guitar. They just bought a guitar from the U.S., costs 10,000 yen. The exchange rate moves then. So now it's only 50 yen to the dollar. The dollar's weaker. Well, now, as the U.S. seller of guitars, I want $100. I don't care how many yen are involved. But now you can get $100 with only 5,000 yen. It takes fewer yen to get the same number of dollars. So if you're in Japan, the American guitar that used to cost you 10,000 yen now only costs you 5,000 yen. From our perspective, the price hasn't changed. But from the perspective of someone using a foreign currency, American goods are now cheaper. In this case, the price has fallen in half. So just as we would buy fewer Japanese goods because imports are more expensive with a weak dollar, so Japanese people would buy more American goods because our exports to them are cheaper for them to buy. Which is why the exchange rate, in large part, determines net exports. If your currency, your domestic currency, goes up in value, that will make your goods more expensive for other people to buy. But it will make their goods cheaper for you to buy. So your currency value goes up, net exports go down. Your value of your currency drops, you're going to export more. You may have heard in the last presidential election, 2016, Donald Trump was going around saying that China is a currency manipulator, that they're engaging in unfair trade practices. One of the things that he was accusing them of is that they were manipulating the value of their currency. It's generally accepted that they do by economists. Those who love Trump, those who hate Trump, we all acknowledge, yes, China actually does this. China's economic growth has been built, like many of the East Asian economies, on exports, encouraging the growth of export industries. How do you help your domestic exporting industries? You keep the value of your currency low. If the Central Bank of China, the People's Bank of China is its name, their central bank, prints a ton of their currency, which it's called both the yuan and the renminbi. I can't pronounce renminbi. Sort of like U.S. currency. We call it the dollar. It's also the buck. These are two different Chinese words used in different contexts. I use yuan all the time because it's the one I can pronounce. They print a ton of yuan and dump that money into the foreign exchange markets. They sell yuan, and they can sell as many as they want because they can print them. If you're constantly flooding the foreign exchange markets with a currency, the price of that currency will fall, meaning it keeps the yuan value low. If the yuan is cheap relative to the dollar, that makes, from the U.S. perspective, Chinese products less expensive, which is why one of the reasons why Walmart is full of them. And this makes U.S. products really expensive to buy in China because you have to trade a huge number of yuan to get a dollar to buy an American product. This is part of, it's called broadly industrial policy, government policies to favor certain sectors of the economy over others. Let's see. Last one. Okay. The Chinese government prints yuan, sells them in the foreign exchange markets. By selling, I mean they trade them. They trade them for U.S. dollars. So they end up building up a supply of U.S. dollars. What do they do with those dollars? Some they keep in reserve, foreign currency reserves. But some they use to buy U.S. Treasury debt, which is why, on the one hand, they're financing our fiscal deficit. When the U.S. government spends more than it takes in taxes, has to borrow the difference, a good piece of that we're borrowing from the government of China, essentially. It's how they recycle their dollars. It also props up the price of the dollar relative to the yuan, so that their products, their exports to us, remain cheap. Imagine the case again of Akira and Joe. Akira is the producer of guitars. Joe domestically is the buyer. Joe sends dollars to Akira. We import a guitar from Japan. Akira takes dollars, goes to the Forex market, and sells them. If that process happens over and over and over, millions and billions of times, dollars would build up in the foreign exchange markets, which would cause the value of the dollar on the Forex markets to fall. If the dollar gets weak, that would make our exports more attractive. People overseas would buy more of them. But that doesn't happen. The value of the dollar stays strong. It always stays strong in pretty much my whole lifetime. With some variation. Which means we continue to run a trade deficit. We import a lot because the dollar buys so much, and we export less because it's expensive for other countries to buy our products. But why doesn't the value of the dollar fall? If we're constantly pumping all these dollars into the Forex markets. The reason is fiscal policy. The value of the dollar on the international exchanges does not fall because even though we're just shoveling dollars into that market, they're going somewhere. They're getting, if they were allowed to build up, the dollar value would fall. But they don't build up because they're being siphoned out of the foreign exchange markets. Where are they being siphoned out? They're being siphoned out to finance the U.S. fiscal deficit. The U.S. government has to borrow money because it runs a deficit. Where does it get that money? It gets it from the international markets. So dollars are constantly flowing into those markets, but they're also constantly being pulled out to finance our fiscal deficit. If we didn't do that, if the United States government did not overspend, so to speak, if it didn't run a fiscal deficit, so it didn't have to borrow any more money, it would stop siphoning dollars, pulling dollars out of the Forex markets, which means dollars would build up in the foreign exchange markets, which would cause the value of the dollar to go down, which would encourage our exports and eliminate our trade deficit. But it doesn't happen because the United States is a unique country. We can essentially borrow as much as we want since it's the reserve currency. We never have the danger of not being able to pay our bills, collectively, that is, because we can just print more dollars. Anyway, that's the connection between fiscal policy and trade policy. Two last points. The real exchange rate, well, how much currency it would take, the ratio of the two currencies, to buy the same product. Well, you need some common product to measure that, something that is sold in both countries, in both currencies, and is the same. Turns out there aren't a lot of those. There are differences in products everywhere. This looks like a joke. It's not. This is a real thing among economists, the Big Mac Index. Since a Big Mac, part of McDonald's marketing strategy is that you can get exactly the same meal anywhere, at any McDonald's, and now any McDonald's worldwide. Consistency. It's part of their brand, which means a Big Mac in the United States is essentially identical to one you'd get in Japan. And it's true, I know. I've had a Big Mac in Japan, and it's the same. So you can look at how many dollars it takes to buy a Big Mac in the United States, how many yen it takes in Japan. The ratio gives you the real exchange rate according to the Big Mac Index. I think it's a little fun thing. It's also very useful. And the last item. There is a marginal return to capital. If you have very little capital, getting some will increase your output a lot. If you already have a ton of capital, you're up to your neck in capital, getting more isn't going to increase output that much. Well, that means that capital sent to a country that doesn't have a lot of it should produce a higher rate of return than capital sent to a country that already has a lot. If that's the case, then capital should flow from rich countries that have a lot to poor countries that don't have a lot, because you get a higher rate of return. The marginal return on capital will be higher, but it doesn't happen. Why doesn't this happen? This shows that some of the assumptions in this model are false. We started out assuming that capital is capital is capital. All investments are the same. There's no difference in risk, no difference in term, etc. There's perfect capital mobility everywhere. None of these are true in the real world. There are a lot of countries where they make it difficult for you to take your money out of the country. That would make you less likely to invest in that country. Not all investments have equal risk. A country with a very poor legal system, where it's difficult to enforce contracts, where there's a lot of corruption, that makes investment more risky. Therefore, you have to charge a risk premium. You have to pay more to persuade people to invest in that kind of environment. And that frequently is a larger factor than the larger marginal return. Even with a greater marginal return to capital in poor countries, because they're capital poor, the other factors that make investing more expensive in poor countries mean that capital does not flow to them the way this simple model would suggest. That's it for this chapter. I hope you liked it. This is an interesting chapter. Okay, see you next time.